A very warm good evening to all the participants. My name is Tariq Siddiqui, and I represent the product marketing function in Collins Learning. Today, I welcome you to this webinar on the topic Integrating Children with Learning Disabilities, with focus on dyslexia by Mrs. Shabnam Aggarwal. This webinar is the third and final one related to learning disabilities by Collins Learning. Here is a brief introduction of Ms. Aggarwal. Her area of specialization pertains to learning disability, and she has been working in the field for the past 27 years. Her formal training is in the field of psychology. She has done her master's in psychology, learning disabilities and counseling, special education, that is her B.Ed in special education, and her LLB, which have enabled her to integrate various dimensions and concerns in her work. Her work experience ranges from working with children with learning disabilities, specifically dyslexia, to working with children with cerebral palsy, intellectual disabilities, and multiple disabilities, understanding and addressing their various needs and concerns. Besides working with children, she also believes that there is a very important aspect of working with parents as well, sharing information with families and parents, and working in partnership with them and the children is essential for a program to be effective and successful. She has also been involved in simplifying, writing, and disseminating information to persons with disabilities, their families, and teachers, through workshops and training sessions. Some of the research studies she has worked on are focused on the right to education and inclusion of children with disability. The learning from the field and the research studies also form the base for advocating for the rights of persons with disabilities. So we've received a lot of questions around the topic, which will be answered by Shabnam ma'am today. Now I request Shabnam ma'am to take over. So thanks all of you and happy participation.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon to everybody. And thank you, the entire team, Papa Collins, for their support. Today's session, as Mr. Siddiqui said, is the last part of the three-part series on the topic of learning disabilities. The first session, we talked about what is learning disabilities and a brief introduction and understanding on what is learning disabilities and how to identify children with learning disabilities in a classroom. The second part, which was last week, focused on the two specific learning disabilities, dyscalculia and dysgraphia. Learning disabilities, as all of you know, is an umbrella term which includes specific learning disabilities. And today we are talking about dyslexia, which is also called a reading disability. Today we will be talking about what is dyslexia, understanding and being able to identify children with dyslexia in a classroom. Both parents as well as teachers can use checklists or certain points or signs to identify a child at a very, very preliminary kind of basis. It is not an assessment at all, but a very, very basic first level screening tool which can help red flag certain areas. We will be looking at some difficulties children face pertaining to reading, spelling, as well as reading comprehension, and also discussing and maybe evolving some strategies which can help children read and spell better. We look at what is dyslexia first to really get an understanding. The word dyslexia literally means not good in languages. Dyslexia is defined by Dr. Hornsby as difficulty in learning to read and write, particularly in learning to spell correctly and express thoughts on paper. This applies to children who have had normal schooling. It is important to understand that children who have had normal schooling and enough or regular opportunities to learn, yet are unable to read or write or spell, those children would only fall under the category of dyslexia. Again, to reiterate the fact that children with learning disabilities, whether it is dyslexia or dyscalculia, we always look at the fact that children with learning disabilities have average to above average levels of intelligence. Another definition, which is a little more detailed, is by the National Center for Learning Disabilities, given in 2005. It highlights certain points. It says that dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is neurobiological in origin and is characterized by difficulties with fluent word recognition, poor spelling, decoding abilities, letter sound association. We will be looking into each of these aspects as we go along today. Secondary consequences might include difficulties in reading comprehension, reduced reading experience, and limited vocabulary. There are various checklists that are available online. I have picked this one by the Dyslexia Association of the UK, which is meant for both primary school children as well as children who are in secondary schools. But I'm giving the detailed checklist, which is meant for children at the primary school level. It says that when you are sitting with a family who have a child with dyslexia or possibility of being a child with dyslexia, look into these aspects. First, check whether there's a family history of similar difficulties. This is because dyslexia or learning disabilities does tend to run in families. Difficulty with phonological awareness, that is really the letter sound association. For a child to understand that each letter, when we are talking about English, each letter, whether it's a B or a C or a D, each of these have a sound associated with it. And it is only when you put together certain sounds that you are able to string it together as a word and read or spell. Difficulty following instructions. We often find children not being able to follow instructions. It could be because of short memory, difficulty with the short-term memory, that they are not able to hold that instruction long enough to be able to implement it. Or it could be if it is a 2-step or a 3-step instruction that you're giving out, it could be the difficulty in sequencing. These are aspects that we had spoken about in detail when we did learning disability, but difficulty in sequencing is one of the difficulties children with learning disabilities, specifically with dyslexia, face. They need time to produce an oral response. When a question is posed to them, they are not often able to answer immediately, and they require that time to process the question and answer. Lack of fluency in reading does affect reading comprehension. We will be doing this in a little more detail, so I'm just going to skip over this for now. Inaccurate decoding. Inaccurate decoding basically means that the child is unable to put together the sounds in a cohesive fashion and read it as a word. Fear of reading aloud. So anything you're not good at does create a level of stress and could also manifest as a fear of something. So for children who are not good at reading, they are apprehensive and they have a fear of reading aloud. And that is why teachers are often asked never to ask a child with dyslexia to read aloud in a classroom. Children with dyslexia do not enjoy reading. There is persistent and marked difficulty with spelling. The link between reading and spelling is something that we're going to talk about. Messy labored handwriting. Any thoughts on why a reading difficulty would show up as messy labored handwriting? Would anybody would like to comment on this?
So teachers looking for your answers. Just waiting for teachers to type in. Okay, Richa ma'am says not able to write letters correctly.
Okay.
And also waiting for answers on Facebook. As of now, yeah. So every letter would be different.
Right.
And Deepa ma'am says not able to correct or understand. Then on Facebook, Vijaya ma'am says as they are not familiar with words.
Right. Thank you so much.
And one last thing from Facebook is difficult to understand the words that have been written.
Yes. Thank you so much for writing in. Yes, all these, and the fact that, and we all often find a child who is unable to complete their work. You know, when it comes to a written task, all the children have finished and this child is probably still on the first line. The reason for this is if you're not able to read, you are not able to see those letters as a chunk, you're not able to see them as a word. So for example, even if we take a sentence like the cat sat on a mat, if the child is unable to put together the T, H, E and read it as the, what is happening is when he or she is asked to copy the sentence from the board, the child is looking up. While other children are looking at one word at a time and reading the and writing the, this child does not know that the THE make the word the. So what happens is the child is looking up at the board and writing letter by letter. So what the end result is, the child has messy handwriting because his focus is divided. He's not able to focus on the writing bit as a chunk. You find a lot of spelling errors because the child probably has missed out on some letter, or even complete words may disappear from the written text. And you will find that the writing is going all over. There will be uneven spacing between words because the child's focus is actually to just copy it letter by letter. Difficulty in finding the right word to describe things, mispronouncing words, difficulty remembering sequential information, which could be names of days, months, letters in the alphabet, or even times table. These can be extremely challenging tasks for children with dyslexia. Poor short-term memory. So if you ask the child to dial a number for you while you are telling him the number, there is a tendency that the child may have skipped on certain numbers in that phone number that you read out. Takes longer than average to complete written tasks, again related to what we discussed the previous slide. Difficulty copying from the board. The child may describe visual discomfort while text reading. So you may have a child who says, my eyes hurt, or my eyes start watering when I look at the board, or the letters are dancing. So these are not excuses. These are actual visual discomfort that the child may face while the child is trying to read. The child can be clumsy or lack coordination, could mix up numerical symbols, have difficulty with math vocabulary. These are things that we had covered in the last session, so I'm not going to go into this, but basically reading difficulties will impact your reading of math, especially when it comes to word problems. The child will face difficulties because the child will be unable to read the word problem and figure out the steps involved in solving it. Miswriting of numbers, so the numbers may be written wrong or they may be mixed up. As a result of all these things, the child may develop a low self-esteem because the child knows that he is unable to cope at the same pace or cope with the same things or be able to read, spell at the level that his or her peers are able to. So all that impacts the child, and the child generally gets that feedback both from the home and from the school that the child is not able to perform at the level at which the others in the class are performing. So again, it could lead to low self-esteem. And how do you detect all this? Generally, behavioral difficulties. You will find the child behaving differently. Some children just clam up, they withdraw, they just kind of cut themselves, and if they could, they would just melt away into the wall. Some children act like the class entertainer. They would be running around. The child would try and find escape routes. You know, if the child is asked to read or do a task that the child is unable to cope with, the child will try and find ways to escape that task. And that's a very human tendency, normal human tendency. So if the child shows behavior which, we find disrupting or different from others, it is really to be seen as a shout out for help, because children, that child is trying to attract your attention, whether you are a teacher, whether you are a parent, that child is trying to reach out to you and say, listen, I need help. Look at me. See what's happening with me because I don't know what's happening. So I need support. So those are the things that if a child is showing difficulties in the classroom or at home, you really need to sit with the child and understand the child and try and support the child in the ways that the child requires the support. I've just taken some points from the checklist given by the Dyslexia Association of the UK on the secondary school, children who are in secondary school. While some of the concepts, the difficulties manifested in the primary school level would continue, there are certain things that become more pronounced, like poor concept of time, again leading to difficulties in organizing their day or organizing their work schedules or meeting deadlines when it comes to assignments. Problems note-taking. In senior school, you are expected to take down notes as the teacher is explaining. And for a child who has difficulty in reading and spelling, note-taking is a difficult task. Word finding difficulties, persistent difficulty with spelling, poor structure and organization of written work, and a lack of confidence. Lack of confidence would really manifest if the child has not been identified or has not received the kind of supports that the child requires, and he or she feels or sees himself or herself as different from others. What is very nice about this checklist is it also highlights certain areas of strength that children with dyslexia may have. I didn't have the time, the time to cover all these, but some of them I've just put down here. Some of the strengths that generally are manifested in children who have dyslexia they are able to see the big picture. They not only are able to see the parts, but they are able to see the whole. They're good at problem solving, they're curious, creative, imaginative, have practical skills. And some of them have some talents, which could be, they're good at sports or they have drama skills. One of the children I worked with, he faced extreme difficulties when it came to reading and spelling and writing. He just wouldn't be able to tolerate writing. He just did not like writing at all. But he was always interested in theater. So his parents used to enroll him in theater class every summer break. And today he's, of course, picked up on his reading and writing and spelling skills, and because he got identified early and got the supports that he required. But today he is also writing his own scripts, creating his own short films, acting in them, and he's quite a star on YouTube. He's also interested in music, and he's writing his own lyrics, setting them to music, and creating short music videos, and again posting them on YouTube. I keep receiving them every week from him. Reading. We look at this slide. I would request all of you to look at this slide and read this sentence, and if you could share what this means.
So any teacher, we are happy to unmute you. If you can show up your hand and would like to speak.
Is anybody able to read this?
I don't see any answers as of now.
Yeah. So let's look at this one and see if you can look at the sentence and look at the code to decode that sentence. Can you try and decode this in, say, a minute or 2 minutes?
Try.
So for example, the L stands for A. So it's, the sentence begins with A. Anybody who's been able to decode it? Even 1 or 2 words, that'll do.
Any teachers would like to answer? No.
No. Okay. So basically you need to, if you were to...
Okay, ma'am, I think there is a teacher who's willing to.
Okay, thank you.
Sunita ma'am, I'm unmuting you. You can.
Ma'am, it's a child. A child sits. I did only this much, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunita ma'am.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes, that's correct. The child sits. How did it feel? How did it feel when you looked at that sentence? When you looked at this? What were the first thoughts that came into mind?
So, Sunita ma'am, would you like to answer that? If you could just show up your hand, then I can choose to unmute.
Anybody, if, you know, like,
Yeah.
What are the thoughts? What are the feelings?
Okay, Sarmishta ma'am, she would like to answer.
Thank you.
Ma'am, please. Please unmute yourself. And Ms. Gupta? Yeah.
Yes. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Ma'am, the first feeling is it is totally unintelligible after reading the text, and I was a little bit anxious. That's what is written there. That's my first feeling. I couldn't decode it.
Right, ma'am. And when you saw this?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
And when you saw this, were you able to decode it, and how did it feel, or how did it go for you?
Okay, ma'am, after you give us the codes, after I decoded it, I feel a little bit relaxed. At least I understood that whatever is written, I can understand now.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Welcome.
Thank you, ma'am.
Basically, thank you for participating and sharing your thoughts on that. The idea why this slide was put in was to just give an experiential feel to this. This is probably how a child with dyslexia sees a sentence. You know, even if it's a meaningful sentence, this is what it appears to the child. And when, as teachers, we tell the child, "Come on, read." No, you can read it. You know, we are literally kind of pushing the child into trying to read it. But even if anybody was to push us to read the sentence, we will not be able to do it. For the child, a meaningful sentence looks just like this, and the child will not be able to attempt that sentence or a word, whatever it may be. To add to it, even if the code is given, the child requires that kind of time to decode that sentence. Once he tries to decode, it takes time. You know, if you could look at this sentence later and try and decode it for yourself, you will realize that we are actually doing it letter by letter. We are not trying to see this sentence as a sentence. We are just trying to do letter by letter and putting those letters together to form words. It is a very taxing process. It takes time. It can be frustrating. And to add to it, for a child who is asked to read in the classroom, there may be children laughing at the child. They may be saying, "Oh, ma'am, he's reading you." But it's the word is "the." It's not "you." So the child gets demotivated and gets even more anxious and stressed and just wants to run away at times. So these are things that we need to keep in mind as teachers when we ask children with dyslexia to read. We need to understand that it is not something that the child is trying to escape. It is something that the child faces difficulty with. He or she cannot read it. Even if you try and force the child to read it, the child will be unable to read. Difficulties that you find when you're working with the child with reading difficulty, the child shows extreme difficulties with letter sound association. Even children who are older, maybe in class 7 and 8, who have not got that early years of intervention, will show a difficulty with associating the letter and the sound. So what letter sound association does is helps you see meaning in a string of letters which form a word. So if the child is not got that base going, that base is not built, that foundation is not there, the child will not be able to read words. Because to decode a new word, a word that is unfamiliar, you can only rely upon letter and sound association. That is how we read a word which is unfamiliar and we've never heard before. The child may show letter by letter or word by word reading, which really leads to a lack of fluency. And like in the sentence that we did before, when we are trying to decode letter by letter or word by word, there would be errors, there would be difficulty in understanding it as a sentence that has meaning. And the child may just read, like if it's the word milk, the child may read M-I-L-K. Or the sentence, the cat sat on the mat, the cat. There may be long pauses between each word, leading to a total lack of fluency. There may be mispronunciation. The child may omit certain letters and read a word like form as for because he's dropped the M from there. There may be repetition of words in a sentence. The child may insert letters or words and read for as from, or make the word in into an inside, which could totally change the meaning of the sentence. The child may substitute words, may read where as when or the other way around. The child lacks a basic sight vocabulary. Sight words are basically words that do not follow the phonetic pattern and are high frequency words. These are words which help us to, help us to bind sentences together and read them as a string of words which make sense. Words like the, you, come, have, which are high frequency words but are not taught in the phonetic way. You don't teach them through the letter sound association. The word the is taught as the. It is not associated with the sound. The child may also show reversals. Reversals could be of letters, or like a B and D, or it could be a complete reversal of a word like was and saw. But reversals are not the primary characteristic that children with dyslexia show. Not all children show reversals, only some do. Some of the strategies that we use for reading. First and foremost, very, very important to be patient and understanding. You need to give the child the time and the space to decode whatever the child is asked to read. Never ask the child to come and read aloud in the class. But you must ensure that the child is an equal participant in the process of the class and he's not left out. So for example, a child has a certain area of interest, or he's good at something. And as a teacher or as a parent, you're aware of those skills or talents or areas of interest of the child. You can ask the child to come and share some of that in the class. So for example, there's a chapter that you're reading and the child has an inclination towards drama. The child can be asked to participate along with a couple of other children and enact the story in front of the class. So the child needs to be included in the classroom. And this is one question that has been posed again and again about including children. So you can find ways of including children, but you need to work along with the child to figure out what are the strengths, what are the interests, what the child would like to do. Because if you try and involve a child in an activity which can stress out the child, it's not going to work. When we start the process of reading, we actually begin with the letter sound association because that is the base and that is the area where the child faces difficulty. So we actually start with each letter. We start with the consonant sounds. So we will do not in the order of the alphabet, but we pick up consonants like B, S, T, N, M, which are high frequency, which are there in high frequency words. We teach the sound of each of these letters separately, not all together, but depending on the age of the child. So if it's a very young child, you will probably do 3 letters or 4 letters, depending on the ability to process and retain that information. Then you do a string of consonants, introduce the letter and the sound, and then introduce vowels one at a time, beginning with the vowel A. And then putting together those those letters, the CVC words, which are the consonant, vowel, consonant words like the cat, mat, sat, and build on that. We also do a lot of nonsense words. Nonsense words are words which do not have a meaning, or maybe words which the child is not familiar with, because a cat and a bat and a sat are words that the child would just know by visual cues, because the child has come across those words so often. So if you include a word which is not a word really, or the child is not familiar with that, you will really get the child to look at the letter sound association and decode the word through that. We also teach sight words alongside. So all those lists of words which do not follow the phonetic pattern, like the and the you and the come, those words are done simultaneously so that the child is able to read short sentences. Multisensory techniques are used while teaching. Multisensory techniques are basically using your visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tactile. So when we are teaching a child to read, if we have put a word on a flashcard, we are showing that flashcard to the child and and saying the word. So if you're showing the word the or cat, we are showing the word cat, we are telling the child, okay, this is the word cat, and asking the child to repeat the word. So the child is already getting that auditory feedback, he's getting the visual feedback, and then you ask the child to write that word on the table with a finger, in a sand tray, use Play-Doh. You can use any kind of material that is available or works for the child. Children love writing in sand trays. It's a lot of fun. So, but it's not practical in a classroom situation. So what works in a classroom situation is just asking the child to write the word with their fingers on the tabletop. So the child writes ka, a, ch, and does it with the sound, so that the child is able to see the three sounds that come together to form the word cat. When we are doing a chapter, a story, begin with a set of flashcards. This helps all kids, not only this child with a learning disability, but all children in the classroom benefit from such drills. If you put some words that are going to come in the chapter, that are going to be introduced in the chapter, words that are unfamiliar, words that are, important concepts that are going to be covered in the chapter, put them on flashcards and do a drill. Just show the words, read it with the child, with all the children, in fact, and ask the children to read those words over and over again. So you do it 1 or 2 times, 3 times maybe, so that the children are familiar with the words. And when they are reading, you could also put it up on the board behind you, so that while they are reading, they have that set of flashcards in front of them, so that they can refer to them when they are reading and finding those words come up in their textbooks. This helps build reading fluency and reading speed. Do timed reading. So if you have a list of words that you've done with the child, you build that speed of reading for the child. You can time the child in while the child is reading the list. Reading windows are again used for children. It's basically in a one-to-one situation. It's basically a piece of paper and you cut out a small window out in it and place it on the text. So if there are like lots of lines on the page, the child is only able to see one line at a time. So you move it as the child reads, and this helps in not overwhelming the child, because sometimes when they see a lot of text on the page, they get totally overwhelmed and they do not want to read. We need to really start at the point where the child is comfortable reading. So we start a little bit, a shade lower than where the child is comfortable reading, because that gives that confidence to the child that yes, I can read. And the child is more willing to read with you if the child feels that he's able to do something. Read along with the child and read punctuation. It's very important because reading along also encourages the child, and sometimes they don't fear making mistakes because they know that you're reading along with them. If it is a lot of text that the child needs to read, you can alternate reading the paragraphs. These days, audiobooks are available, so especially for senior school kids who are required to read a lot, books in digital formats is always a great idea. Whenever you are reading with the child, always remember to note down the errors the child is making, but do that discreetly. Let the child not come to know that you are noting down errors. This is important because when you note down the kind of errors the child makes, it helps you plan for the next lesson and you can focus on those words. Reading is also linked to spelling. And as you can see on this slide itself, this is a child who's trying to write that spelling is difficult, challenging, and then decided that no, these are two words which I'm unable to spell, so I'll just use the word hard, which is a word that I know how to spell. This is again a sample of a child. She's a class 4 student, and this is her version of the names of the months. And she first gave me the sequence orally before writing, and this is how it goes. The first one is January, May, August, February, June, July, March, April, September, October, November, and December. So if you focus on the words that she's written a maths, and she's written something that looks like train. The only word correct here is May. She spelled that correctly. This is another child who's, she was in class 3 when she did this. What she's done is written the word clam, but she's broken up the word and says cl-am. When she broke up the word cl, she wrote L-C and then did the am. The next word flip, again, fl and ip, but the ip part got flipped and I became E. Similarly for flop, slip is the word spelled correctly, and the last one is slop. So again, the L sound is missing in that. So some of the difficulties you will notice in children who have difficulties with spelling is bizarre spelling, like you saw the word maths written for October, November, addition of letters, omission of letters. There could be phonetic overgeneralizing. When you are asked to write the word said, you find this very, very often. Children often spell said as SED because they're doing it phonetically. Because once they've learned the letter sound association, they try and write each word according to the phonetic pattern. Letter inversion, writing an N for a U or the other way, writing M for a W or the other way around. Missequencing, so the word felt could be written as left or the other way around. Homophone confusion, not being sure of which there to use, THERE or THEIR or SEE or SEA. So these are confusions that are often seen, because when you give a dictation, you always give the word in a context. You give a sentence and say, I want this C or I want this there. Mirror writing and letter reversals. Spellings and reading are intimately linked, because to spell correctly, child needs to rely on the stored representation, and these stored representations of words are imperfect in children with dyslexia. This is a quote by Dr. Sally Shewitz in the book Overcoming Dyslexia. So that link between spelling and reading is always there. Children can learn to spell better if they are taught using the multisensory techniques like I explained for the reading part. The same strategies work for children when they come to when it comes to spelling, because they need to hear the word, say the word. So if you're doing dictation, what we normally do is say the word, ask the child to repeat the word, because that ensures that the child has heard the word correctly. Because often you'll find errors because the child has not heard the word and he just writes whatever comes to mind. So when you give a word to the child to write, ask the child to repeat the word for you and then write it. The child also uses all the spelling rules and all the techniques that you have taught over the period of time and breaks up the word before writing them. There are a lot of spelling rules that are taught, and it goes in sequence, like I shared about in the reading part. We're talking about letter sound association and building onto CVC words and doing each vowel independently, and then it goes on and on. We talk about magic key rule and the C rule, all those rules which help the child to understand how to spell better. Mnemonic aids are a wonderful tool for a lot of words. You often find that children spell the word because incorrectly. They get hassled, and thanks to text messaging these days, it often becomes BCOZ, and you can't have that in assignment or a assessment test. So mnemonic aids really help the child in understanding this, getting the sequence of letters correct in a word. So because mnemonic aid that is often used by a lot of children is saying bake 8 as in AIGHT, bake 8 cakes and use 6 eggs. So once the child learns that line, all the child needs to do is pick up the first letter of each word and spell because. And it works wonderfully well. Another one which works for a lot of children and they really enjoy it is the "Oh you lucky duck" rule. Actually, what we normally do is draw a duck and write OULD. It actually stands for OHO, lucky duck, and write the words could, would, should below that. So the child never forgets how to spell these 3 words. And these are words that child often finds difficult to spell. So, and you can also create your own mnemonic aids, which is a lot of fun for children. The B and D reversal. A lot of children actually, children who do not have learning disability also make a lot of reversals when they first start out. So till the age of around 7, you find a lot of children confusing the B and the D. For children with dyslexia, that reversal pattern can carry on beyond that age also. The strategy that works very effectively is, if you can try it, put your hands together like this, palms facing you. So if you do this, what you get is a B. And you can also use a washable marker, a sketch pen to write the letter B here and do the same and write the letter D here. So when you put it together and you look at it from your perspective, you will find B and D coming together and you say, okay, and that's a bed that you've got. So the child never forgets this as a B and this as a D. And it's a very simple technique that children can just use without anybody even coming to know that they are trying to check for a B or D. Reading comprehension. When the child faces difficulty in reading, the child's speed of reading is affected. The child's not able to read fluently. It impacts how the child is comprehending a text. So you often find a huge discrepancy between the reading comprehension abilities of a child and the listening comprehension. So when an assessment is done, both these comprehension passages are done with the child to see whether there is a difference and what kind of differences the child shows when the child has to read a passage and comprehend, and when the child has to listen to a passage being read out and then answer questions based on that. The listening comprehension is always an easier task for children with dyslexia. When a child is reading, a child who has difficulty with reading, If other children are reading a paragraph in 5 minutes, this child will require probably 15 minutes to read the same paragraph. What it does is it breaks the chain of thoughts. So once the child starts reading, he's understood probably the first sentence, goes on, goes on. By the time the child comes to the last sentence in that paragraph, the child is totally lost about what the paragraph was about because the first sentence is just out of the memory. It's been so long since the child read that sentence that it just does not fit into the child's comprehension. So reading speed does impact reading comprehension. Other factors that impact reading comprehension is when if the material is too difficult for that child. So if the child is reading a level 2 book and the material presented is a level 4 book, the child will just not be able to handle it and comprehend it. Poor concentration on memory. If the child is unable to hold in memory what has been read, the complete picture is lost on the child. Often find discrepancies between the English and Hindi reading. So if the child is not very sure about, is not very fluent in a language, the child will face difficulties in comprehending it because the child has a limited vocabulary bank and is not familiar with sentences or sentence structures in English. But a child who has reading difficulties would probably not have so much of a discrepancy between the English and the Hindi because in both the child will face difficulties in reading and reading comprehension. Poor vocabulary, because vocabulary is built either through reading or through listening. So if the child is read to very regularly, the child has a better vocabulary bank. But if the child is not read to, the child does not have that vocabulary because the child is unable to read very well. Poor use of contextual cues. Sometimes when we are reading and we come across a word which is not familiar to us, we are able to kind of figure out what it means looking at the context. But for this child, it is very difficult to pick up these contextual cues and read meaning into new words. Some of the strategies that are used for building reading comprehension. One of the strategies, two strategies here, which are really effective is, the first one is the SQ3R strategy, which stands for survey, question, read, recite, and review. So basically what you're doing is asking the child to first look at the given text, survey it, look through it, skim through it, look at things like the heading, the subheadings, and anything that has been highlighted or is in bold or in italic, or there are some pictures or graphs that go with it, just to look and survey those. Look at the questions that are there or frame a question. So suppose you're reading about the solar system and the subheading is about planets. So you turn that into a question and say, what are planets? Or how many planets? So whatever the paragraph or the subhead is about, you just flip the heading into a question. Read what is given, understand or take out the main points from there, and recite those points and say, okay, from this is how I answer my question. What are planets? Planets are 1, 2, 3. These are my points that I've got from the text that I have read. And then review. If you have skipped something, add it on and recite again. And that builds your reading comprehension. So basically what you're doing is you're reading with a purpose, and you're trying to find out the main points or main ideas given in that. And you're also trying to read between the lines and look at the inferential part of the text. A strategy that is very, very effective is, we often do comprehension passages in school. Instead of reading the passage first, look at the questions, read the questions, and see what you get from the questions. Because once you've read the questions, it kind of forms a base, a framework in your mind. It gives you certain ideas. You may find names of some characters in the questions. You may find some cues or clues in the questions that can help you relate to what the passage is. So once you start reading the passage, you're not going into it blindly. You are going with some idea of what that passage is about and who's there in that story, if it's a story. Read the questions and then start reading the passage. What it does is you are actually reading with meaning, because you are trying to understand what is there. And as you read along, you are just filling in the slots that you have formed in your mind, that framework that you have got in your mind. And then that information just keeps getting slotted, and it is more sequential. It is easier to comprehend, and you are able to find your answers that you're looking for at one go. You don't have to read, reread, go back and forth between questions and the passage. So this is a technique that can easily be used in a classroom situation, and all children will really find it simpler to do it this way. When we talk about difficulties, we also need to look at the kind of supports that we need to offer the child with reading or spelling difficulties, or child who is struggling with reading comprehension. When we talk about accommodations, we need to understand that accommodations is not an unfair advantage. It's not something extra that you're giving the child. It is only providing a level play field for that child. So if you look at the picture that is given there, it is not about equality, because if you're looking at equality, then you are not helping that child. But we need to look at the second part, which is equity, where the child with disability or the child who needs that support is receiving the supports, so that the child can be on an equal footing vis-a-vis the other children. This is a note that was there on the question paper of a child with dyslexia whom I worked with. She was in class 5 at that time, and this is very well established private school in Delhi. And it just says, there's a note both to the invigilator as well as the examiner. To the invigilator, it just says that, facilitate, supervise the child, help the child understand the questions if required, help the child understand the instructions, make sure that each and every question is answered and each and every subpart of every question is answered, because the tendency to skip question can be there. Remind the child to write neatly and concentrate on his or her work, and allow an extra time. And that can vary. To the evaluator, it says that while correcting the answer sheet, you please overlook illegibility, overlook spelling errors unless grossly wrong, overlook number reversals, overlook if questions have been copied incorrectly, assign marks if the concept is presented, even if it is presented in points and complete sentences are not written. Do not deduct marks for presentation. Learning disability, since it has been recognized legally under the new law, which is the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act of 2016, there are a whole lot of accommodations that the law extends to children with learning disabilities. It talks about extra time. There is a pool of subjects from which the child can choose subjects. So a child who faces difficulty in something like maths or social studies because of long answers can opt for another subject in lieu of that. The child also gets exemption from studying a third language, and the child can avail of the facility of a scribe. Scribe is a person generally who is assigned to write on behalf of the child. So class 10, class 12 exams, the child can give answers orally and the scribe can write for that child. These facilities can also be and must be extended to children right from early years so that the child does not need to struggle. Why should the child only receive these only at the class 10 or class 12 board exam time? They should be there for the child. For younger children, you can test orally, have a buddy system in place, do not insist on written assignments, have multiple alternate question papers or other strategies. You can change the way you are presenting, you are giving the question paper. It could be fewer questions. You can ask the child to study fewer chapters or give multiple choice questions. You can also ask the child to present that information differently. It could be through flowcharts, graphically, using keywords or bullet points. You can ask the child to prepare a project based on the assignment given, or to even record the information in audio and give you an audio recording. Never mark for spelling errors and never use a red pen. If you look at this is a dictation. I've not filled in the words. If this is a dictation of 5 words, you have a red pen marking 4 crosses and 1 tick mark. Do you see the tick mark? Or does it get lost?
You see it.
What if you were to do this? The same thing, you're using a blue pen and you are just putting that tick mark in front of the word which is correct, spelled correct.
It stands out.
It stands out. Is the child receiving the message differently?
Yes.
Yes. So these are simple, doable strategies, but it makes a world of a difference in the life of a child. So please, please, please avoid using a red pen. Don't circle, because all the child will see is red circles. And for teachers, I think it's very important. As a teacher, I can understand. We are all apprehensive. We are unsure when we're dealing with a new situation. We are not sure about how to work with a child. We are not familiar with certain strategies. But all of us work with children who are totally diverse. They have different learning styles, different pace of learning. They learn differently. So a child with learning disability, or a child with any disability for that matter, is just another child. So as teachers, we just need to explore a little. Don't be scared to trial and error. Work with the child, because the child will tell you how the child learns better. Use certain strategies. Special education is not a rocket science. It's just another way of teaching. It's just making that teaching more effective for the child. And all these strategies, I think, will benefit all children. It's not about this one child. So it's not as if you have to give extra time. Yes, the child may require that one-on-one, which can be a separate thing, but a lot of these strategies can be used effectively in a classroom. And most importantly, just enjoy exploring alternate teaching strategies. The child will also enjoy that journey together with you and become better and more effective in the learning. This is a very beautiful poem which is written by a 10-year-old. I just can't resist. I know I'm running out of time. I've already overshot the time limit, but it's a beautiful poem written by a 10-year-old girl, which I just found on the website understood.org. It's the name of the girl is not written, but it's a 10-year-old girl. The teacher discussed dyslexia in a classroom, and they were doing this concept of reverse poems, and this is what the child wrote. You can read the poem the way it's supposed to be read, but actually it is supposed to be read in the reverse. So it says, I can make it in life. Nobody could ever convince me to think that I am a failure. That is wrong. I was meant to be great. I have a talent for words. Nobody would ever say I am stupid. I think it's just kind of says it all, because children with dyslexia or children with learning disabilities are not stupid. They are equal or even beyond equal when it comes to their abilities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And there's some thoughts that I thought before we take questions, it's my duty to read from the teachers.
Right.
So there is Yogesh Handaji who is commented on Facebook, and the thought is, ma'am, whatever you shared in today's session was really helpful to me as an educator to understand students better. Certain things we should be careful as teachers. Thanks for all the good tips, especially the correction part.
Thank
So
you.
this is a thought, and it just stood out, so I thought I should read it for you. Now, we have two questions that I think we could quickly take.
Sure.
So the first question is from Mr. Gladson and Ms. Rajeshwari, and it is how to work with parents.
Yes, most important, super important to work as a team. Teachers, special educators, parents, and the child, all of us need to work together. It's only when we work together will we make it effective. And when you actually sit down with the parent, you really need to reassure parents because they are going through their own anxiety. You need to reassure the parent that you understand them, you understand what they're going through, you understand their challenges, and you understand how hard it is for them. And you need to kind of reassure the parents also that you're there for them to, sit with them and work together so that the child is able to learn effectively both in school as well as home. Because if different things are working with the child at home and different things at school, it's not going to lead to effectively learning. So you really need to see parents as partners in the process and be honest with them and share things, because certain time periods in each, on all our lives, we are not able to do everything. So if an assignment or chapter is not done, let the parent also feel confident enough to reach out to you and say that it's not possible in this time period or you need extra time. So you really need to work as partners and involve the child at every step.
Okay, thank you so much. And there is also a follow-up question coming as a precursor to involving parents. First, we need to convince the parents that the child has got a problem, isn't it? And most parents wouldn't take it because they believe they know their child more than anyone else. And so the question here is how to convince the parents to go for a testing of their child.
I'll just share my experience in working with parents. I always start by asking parents what they feel about the child. And I have always found that what the parent tells you is 100% accurate. Your assessment of the child and a formal assessment of the child will show you exactly what the parent has told you. A lot of mothers work with children at home, and if you talk to the mothers, they will be able to tell you exactly what the child is able to do and what the child is unable to do. So you get a pretty accurate picture if you just flip the question and ask the parents, because it's very difficult to hear negative things about your own child. So if as a teacher, I am telling a parent, your child is unable to read, your child is unable to spell, that you're putting that parent on a defensive. and it will lead to confrontation.
Okay.
So rather than that, ask the parent what he or she feels best, always best to deal with both parents together, so that you know that both parents are on the same page as far as their child is concerned, because sometimes you find differing opinions. You know, the father says something and the mother feels something else. So you need to sit with both parents and get an understanding from them as to what they feel about their child and start from there. In that case, you will find, and you also need to, like, what I said earlier about reassuring the parent that you are trying to help the child, you're not trying to work against the child. So that reassurance is very, very important.
Exactly. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your thoughts here. We'll just take two more questions and then we'll quickly close. This is a question coming from Facebook. I thought Sanchita ma'am asked, can you please share the parameters of the checklist?
Nandi, this checklist has, I've taken it from the website. If you just Google Dyslexia Center UK, you will find the checklist. But it is always good if you sit with a person who is trained in the area of learning disability, so that you can, be a little more objective when you're looking at a child.
Okay.
And
the last, yes,
it's
please.
always a step towards a formal assessment. You know, if you feel that the child is making those errors on a consistent basis, despite the inputs or the learning opportunities, you can speak to parents and ask them what they feel about it, and then, you know, consider a formal assessment. But again, assessments, the reason behind a formal assessment must be discussed with parents. They should be reassured that it's not, because you want the child out of your class or out of your school, because that is a fear amongst parents.
Exactly. And the last question this evening is how to make inclusion work. It's a question asked by Ms. Sangeeta.
When we talk about inclusion, I think all of us have to work together to make sure that children with learning disabilities and children with all disabilities are made equal participants in classroom. All the strategies that we've discussed can enable that child to feel more equipped to work in a classroom situation, provide those opportunities for the child to participate and bring their contributions into the classroom and feel that they are equal. When they are looking at other children in the classroom, they often feel that they are have a lot of limitations. So just supporting that child and establishing that rapport. Also, we need to remember that it's not some system or some government that works for or anti-inclusion. All of us are part of that system, and all of us need to do our little bit, even if that child gets that support from you, because you are the most important person in that child's life at this stage. The child is in class 2 and you are the class teacher of class 2. For that child, you are the most important person. What you say matters to that child. So even if the school as a whole, the senior school has a different policy or philosophy, or the school doesn't believe in inclusion, I think each one of us as individuals, if we take those small steps towards changes and we show that change, that child's life changes over a period of time, and gradually it kind of percolates down the system, and people begin to believe that it is something that is possible. So all of us just need to take that one step towards making one child fully included.
And just a follow up, because of the pandemic, I'm sure most teachers would be talking to their students in the virtual world rather than the actual factual world. So, Ms. Gupta asked the question, can you suggest an online screening tool to help the child?
I didn't quite get it. Online screening tool for teachers?
Yes.
I wouldn't, I mean, it's not as if you need to really assess a child to really help the child. I think if you find that, personally, I don't really believe in checklists. I think just working with the child, you will be able to identify all the difficulties the child faces, whether it's in reading, spelling, maths, whatever it may be. Once you have identified the kind of difficulties the child faces, just try and work different strategies and see what works for the child and see whether the child is able to learn better. Because a checklist maybe, at the end of it, you may feel, okay, this child has dyslexia. Then what? You will have to start right from the beginning again. So I think it is better that rather than giving a child a label, just try and help the child in the areas that the child faces difficulties.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So on behalf of Collins and the teachers who participated in the session, I'd like to thank Shabnam ma'am for all the 3 sessions, and you've really opened up the eyes of most of the teachers over here. And I'm sure they would have been inspired and they'd be perhaps implementing all these suggestions that you suggested them in their classes and with the students and in the community also, even if they're not teachers. So with those words, I'd like to sincerely and wholeheartedly thank you, ma'am, for joining us all these 3 Fridays. And to all the teachers who are here, we would sincerely like to thank all of you for being with us and also for being such participative audience. So thanks to all of you, and wish you all a happy and a safe weekend. As always, please stay safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you.